guillotine choke or the front headlock in sport is done just by wrapping, and people have variations of putting the hips forward and all different types of contractions. We're not looking for that at all. What we want to do after our impact is we want to wrap, and the first thing we're going to do is smear that trachea. So we're coming from the outside, pushing into that carotid sinus, and in effect, attacking him on the angle, pushing the trachea off to one side. This is going to do two things. It's going to remove the laxity, all the looseness and wiggle room in the trachea, and as it moves across, you start to get choked at a windpipe level. It's also going to smear an opening, exposing the carotid sinus. And in effect, when I pull, I'm going to be pulling pressure into the carotid sinus. It's painful. The trachea is getting out of the way. Trachea is getting impinged, so we're getting breath and blood affected both at the same time. So one into our hit, wrapping and smearing. As the hand comes around, I'm looking simply to grab the meat of my hand and to force up. And I try to avoid leaning back as I do it, because if I lean back, I'm actually facilitating a lot of Jordy's escapes, which can include body locks and pushes and, attacks against my balance. So rather than lean back, I'd like to shrug my shoulders and squeeze my shoulder blades together so that I am moving my arms up my body. So again, smearing from one side and then lightly coming up, pulling my shoulders together. That first contraction is essential. If I just go in with reflex like a gorilla and I muscle it, a lot of times I'm going to lean back. That makes me more vulnerable. Another thing to consider is that I'd like to have my hip driving into a center line, both as a kazushi to break his balance and occupy his attention to cause him to rebase and lose a second or two, but also to protect my own groin. I'm generally going to push my hip in, and then I'm going to lift up with my shoulders. So one into my brachial stun, smearing from the outside, shrugging the shoulders, and driving the hip in. There are variations where my free hand, instead of supporting, can underhook to take this hand away. And then thereby, this way, if Jordy tries to attack with his hand, he doesn't have much, and I can put my head down to roof it. And from the other side, Jordy's going to have a harder time getting to my groin because my hip is forward. And really all I'm looking to do is get 1 or 2 seconds of free choke time where he doesn't have easy access to weapons or groin or vital targets on my being. Again, that's another reason we're looking for that brachial stun first, is to gain another second or two of disorientation, so by the time the choke is on, he's not recognizing that it's there. And then, if ever it was a failing position and we weren't getting enough force, we would look to transmute it to transition to a different approach or a different attack. Attack number 2 from that same smear is simply to loosen the choke, move to the far side of the trachea, and now smear Jordy's trachea back. So in choke 1, I saw that I was smearing the choke towards the wall, towards myself. I loosen it in choke 2. I'm using my thumb to, in effect, pull it out towards the camera. And now I'm squeezing it here. There's all sorts of variations using the wrist bone, using the thumb notch, or even using the spike of the thumb. Right? From these positions when I come in is usually enough with the wrist bone, but as I come back, very often, if my primary choking arm is not doing the work, I'll pop up my thumb on the other side and I'll drive this into the side of the trachea. So here I'm using my left wrist to smear into Jordy, but as I come back, I'll bring you here to show you, my pulling lifting hand, I can flick up my thumb and now push that into the trachea here. Right? And so this is now causing a profound scissoring action between my wrist bone and my thumb. And if I use Jordy's tricep as a replacement, I can see there's a tremendous amount of push that you can generate from that thumb, which is more than enough for the trachea. So again, brachial stun going in, wrapping hard and aggressively. I'm pulling up with that wrist bone, and I'm gripping under for angle 1. Angle 2 can either be going past and hitchhiking back, or using my thumb to go in and to scissor to the trachea. Those are our first 2 small variations of the hangman's choke or the guillotine front headlock. There are tons of variations manipulating the trachea, moving it from side to side to spear into that carotid sinus with the thumbs. Again, you can be creative here, but the traditional way to show it is a wrap and a smear one way and a pinch and a pull the other.